Hello and welcome to Timeout Srish-tea, where we have candid conversations over a cup of tea. My guest today is a filmmaker, a musician, and an entrepreneur, and so much more. Welcome Raghav Murali to the show.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Bhuvan. Great to be here.
So, what brings you to SMI today?
I was invited to conduct a little workshop, masterclass sort of a session, talking about my experiences as a filmmaker, with my also how the industry has evolved in the time that I have been around, and perhaps what the students can expect in terms of the future. What does it hold in store for us, for the industry, technology, and of course, where does design fall into all of that? And how does it impact the students and what they might foresee?
So, how was the session like? Do you find any similarities and differences between the time that you were growing up as a young filmmaker and these guys at BWalk are doing the same? Do you find any differences or similarities in that?
So, of course, the similarities are that just like you guys, I was also in a cocoon like this. I'm calling it a cocoon, and please understand, I don't mean it in a negative way. It's just a sheltered situation where you get to hone your skills and learn to master your craft, and you have the support of supportive faculty, you have equipment, and so you have access to all these resources. So that way, I also had a pretty similar experience. I went to film school at Chapman University in Los Angeles. So, of course, different kind of resources, different kind of experience. Because I was in the US, the exposure I had was much more to Bollywood and more, the culture was more in tune with that, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to here, if you are looking to become a filmmaker, your exposure is perhaps a lot closer to the Kannada industry, which is nearby, Bollywood, of course.
Yeah.
And if some of you are from nearby states, then the industries of those states, whether it's Tamil cinema or Telugu or whatever it is, right? So those are, I would say, the similarities. The differences are, of course, the time in which we're having this experience. I was in film school as a grad student in about 10 years ago. So in those days, smartphones were around, but they weren't as prevalent as they are now. Sony had just come out with, I think, its first alpha series of DSLR. And at that point, Canon was the forerunner in the DSLR world. Sony was just beginning to catch up. Shooting video on DSLR itself was considered an interesting thing back then. The film cameras, most people were still trying to hire big like Arri Alexas and like that to shoot on. And if you think about how many people were shooting on their phones, these days, everyone shoots on their phones. And it's very normal. Also, a major thing that was coming up when I was in film school is YouTube. And I say it was coming up.
Yeah.
In the sense, YouTube was already a standard format. It existed. But it was the time I was in film school was around when YouTube stars became a thing. A production company that I worked for right out of school, they were called Replay Collective. And we used to shoot a lot of music videos and promotional content and stuff like that. Primarily music videos for these rising YouTube stars. You may have heard of a couple of them, maybe. I don't know, because they were American stars, so they may not have as much impact here, but names like Ricky Dillon or Trisha Paytas, Shane Dawson, like these are some of the names that we shot videos for.
Yeah.
You can check them out online there, obviously, because they're YouTube, it's on YouTube, right? And the funny thing is these YouTube stars obviously got famous for doing YouTube things. It wasn't famous for their music.
Yeah.
But because they had gained enough popularity, they now had a following. They ended up pursuing a passion of theirs, which was to be a professional musician. So they released albums, they released music videos, they collaborated with other famous celebrities. For example, Ricky Dillon had a music video with Snoop Dogg, so we shot that. So all these kinds of interesting experiences. And it's funny to me now because YouTube is now a standard long format.
Yeah.
It's not even long format, like movies, OTTs, web series, right? But music videos and things like that, YouTube is still the standard for that. And now being a YouTuber has evolved. Blogging and all of that was still fresh 10 years ago. Now everyone does it. Now Instagram has become huge. When I was in film school, I wasn't on Instagram. I joined Instagram in like 2017 or something like that. I am new to Instagram relatively. Obviously, now I've been on it a few years. But I'm thinking about when were you guys on Instagram? Since you were born, is what you're trying to say?
No, I got onto Instagram after in 10th grade. So
Which was
yeah, about 2018, 20.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess we all got on Instagram around the same time, just as different generations, right?
No, but I had friends who went onto Instagram like well into their 4th grade. So
Oh my God. Okay.
yeah.
Crazy. Because I always consider Instagram for us, when I started on Instagram, it was still a very image heavy medium. That video wasn't as big on Instagram yet. Being photographers or something.
Yeah, I remember the Instagram used to be like for photographers and people used to post photos. That's the reason I got into Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And same, I got into it because I thought as a filmmaker, I should have an Instagram so people see that I have an aesthetic eye or something like that, you know? And it's funny now, I use Instagram for my poetry.
Oh,
So I'm also a published author now, author, poet. I don't know which you would call it. It's a poetry book, so I guess published poet would be more appropriate. And I didn't use any marketing tools the longest time. And 8 months after I released my book, I decided, okay, maybe I should start. So now I use Instagram for that.
yeah. I mean, the intent is the same, right? The medium shifted, but the intent is the same. Just to put oneself out there.
Very much, right? In fact, one of the things I was talking about today in the class was the creator economy. Are you guys familiar with that? Okay. So the creator economy is this word, this term that's being thrown around everywhere. The obvious understanding of what the creator economy is it's an economy based around the creator, right? I mean, these are the obvious words we'd use. But if you were to dig a little deeper, you realize it's not just about who's creating things. It's about why. Why are they creating? Why are each of us now that creator who the economy is built around?
Definitely.
The principle is you now, because of the amount of content out there, need to find a way to differentiate yourself. And the only way to differentiate yourself is to create some sort of a consistent brand. And I don't mean like a company brand. I mean a personal brand. Right? Because right now, I am Raghav the filmmaker, I am Raghav the poet, I'm Raghav the musician, I'm Raghav the business owner, whatever, all these things. But that's a mumble jumble. And if I ever want to get hired somewhere, what does that mean for me? Which part of that do I showcase? And how do I showcase it? And how do I make it relevant to the work that I want to do, to the people that I want to be sending it to? So these are now very pertinent questions. Because whatever you do now, your personal brand matters. Stuff you post on social media matters. Your LinkedIn profile matters.
Everything you do, like on the very smallest of levels.
Exactly. And that is what the creator economy is.
Yeah.
So I forget where we got to the creator economy from.
So yeah, my question would be around that. Earlier there was a differentiation between commercial films and art films, but now because of the growing of the art festivals and maybe OTTs, there's a lot of blurred lines that have come across,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you navigate around that, around being yourself while also being profitable or be marketing that brand of yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And that's very pertinent to this whole creator economy thing we just spoke about. Now, with commercial cinema, forget the cinema aspect of it, but you realize the word commercial implies inherently that it is a business.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, with commercial cinema, they're explicitly able to showcase themselves as a business. But I think what we end up missing out on or not realizing is that all of art is also a business. Whether you're making an art film, whether you are, whatever the industry, whatever the creation, there is a business to it because everything costs money.
Yeah.
And therefore, the only way to recoup that is to find ways to sell it, market it, make that money back in some shape or form. So as an artist, as a filmmaker, if you do want to find a way to get yourself out there, I don't think there's only one singular path. It helps to have some resources at your disposal, whether they're financial or otherwise.
Yeah.
For example, non-financial resources would be access to things like cameras and equipment, for example. Yeah. So it's about finding those resources, seeing how you can utilize them, the people that you meet, the relationships that you build. But most of all, it's about finding a way to build yourself that stable corpus. So if it's a financial corpus, ideally, because that will enable you to have a little more say in your life. So commercial cinema exists because it's a massive industry. So it's a great way for people to get exposure. It's a great way for you to learn the intricacies of the industry, how things work, and to understand that organization matters. a lot of artists, especially if they go down the art film route, they tend to, forget that they are still creating something that is, it's not that different. The only difference is scale that we're talking about
Yeah.
here, right? In the commercial cinema, it just has way more parts to it because of which you have way more people working on it. So it becomes a big company.
Yeah.
What you're putting out is the same thing. Not the same thing, but essentially it's
Say that the target audience shift.
your target audience shift, your product is slightly different, but your final product is still, it's a basic visual moving image with some sound, right?
Yeah.
Like that is the same, but it's about how we get there and what the intent is that matters. The problem with art house cinema is a lot of people still don't view it as a business that it is. Those who do, they are the successful ones, I think, because they're the ones who understand, okay, if I need to sustain myself out of this, because that's the dream, right? You want to be able to sustain yourself from the thing you are passionate about, that you want to spend your time doing. You don't want to be doing that work for somebody else. Not to say it's wrong to. It's whoever wants to do what, right? But to get to this stage, it helps to learn from, because someone else has done it here. Someone else has done this also. So where can you get those learnings from? I think will truly help to figure out what path works best. And it's not that it's one or the other. I think it's a matter of, there are people you'll notice who do a bit of both. This is the stuff that is driven by the proceeds of this. I'm speaking very abstractly, but I mean, working in a commercial establishment will help build a corpus that will support your passionate establishment, potentially. So hopefully that helps answer a bit.
Yeah.
I realize I speak a lot, but I've also been in that, I came here to speak today. So since that door has been opened, until the day is done, it will remain.
Yeah. And you talked about how having a personal finance corpus is very essential to the security and, the general, your efficiency as a whole and your satisfaction as an artist. And you being an entrepreneur, have worked with blockchain and global PPE trade. So can you walk us through it? How?
So those very much came out of a necessity. So I started my company, Mindist Media, with my partner to make movies. That's where we started. We wanted to write, shoot and direct web series, these things like that. We realized very soon that obviously that doesn't pay the bills because it takes a very long time to sell a script. For example, I'm about to start producing a movie right now. The script we wrote about 2.5 years ago, and it just got funded now. So it takes a very long time, and the likelihood of something getting funded is still very low. And in this particular case, it was my other writing partner who was the one who managed to, secure that funding through the sources we did. But it's one of those scenes where you never know. So I had already moved on from it. And then this was a pleasant surprise that it popped back in my life. So we had started our company to do that. Then we were doing corporate work because that's what would help pay the bills. When I say corporate work, I mean we were doing ads and jingles and servicing corporate companies. Right? Everything from shooting stuff for them to writing their copy to graphic design work, music for their ads, whatever. So the whole gamut, kind of like a full service agency, but very small. So then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed everything. Just before COVID, we were getting to a point where our company had just been growing and we were just about to hit like some 6 or 7 new clients and expand an extra like 5, 7 people. It was going to be like we were in that. And then when the pandemic hit, we also lost a lot of our potential clients because every company was hit, It was a tough period. And so during that time, we had to find a way to pivot. Like what could we do? There was no production happening because we couldn't leave the house. So that's around the time when this whole, it's funny you bring up the global PPE trade. For those who don't know what PPE is, it's basically the protective equipment. It's a very broad term, but simply put, we were part of the global glove trading. And for those who don't know, and most people don't know because this was not something that was really out there. Obviously during COVID, everything medical was necessary. And so hospitals were flooded and mainly the things they needed the most.
Yeah.
And funnily, the thing they needed the most, whether they needed it or not, was being traded the most were gloves, specifically nitrile gloves, which are a very specific kind of medical glove. Now, and I don't remember how we chanced upon it, but this was this weird, like underground global, just phone call thing. And we were not successful at all. We didn't close any deals. But we spent months like on these crazy phone calls in the middle of the night, speaking to people all over the world. And when I say all over the world, I mean like I had one of the people we'd be speaking to every other day was in Israel, one in Croatia, one in, then a few in the US,
Yeah.
and then in other parts of Europe and other parts of Asia, like Bangladesh. And it was crazy, man, because everyone was trying to make a buck, right? Everyone was like, okay, we know this trade is happening. Everything is going at stupid prices. So the idea was
Demand, like,
very high demand.
yeah, exactly.
But if you actually looked at the numbers, it was not possible because simply put, no one could manufacture that much.
Yeah.
There were only 3 countries in the world that were manufacturing it. And within those 3 countries, there were like 10 manufacturers overall who were manufacturing that glove.
Yeah.
And if everyone is selling the same thing, you realize at some point, everyone is selling things that don't exist. So this really opened our eyes at that time to what it means to get in the hype of something, right? And what's funny is we faced a similar thing later with blockchain. Now, it's not the same at all because with blockchain, we were building something very different. We weren't part of the crypto craze
Yeah.
where we weren't playing trade. We weren't trying to trade in crypto and make a buck out of that. We were trying to build a platform for the trading of historic artifacts, or rather shares of historic artifacts. It's called, what ownership is it called? I'm forgetting the name now, but it's like basically allows splitting of ownership or something, the same way shares work. Yeah. But the idea was to be able to do it with historical artifacts, real estate.
Like the ownership, the general.
Exactly, yeah. So for example, if I split this cup into 10 pieces, it's like owning a piece of that
Yeah.
cup. But rather than this, it would be shares that represent those pieces. Same principle, just like owning a company. So that was what we were building. Now, of course, I think we came across our idea just a little sooner than, and I think if someone else builds it right now, they might find more success. And also, as we were building it, a crypto went through a second crash
Yeah.
during that zone. So it is what it is. And I ended up then moving on to work with a music company for a while. For about a year, I was working with Musify. They are also based out of Bangalore currently. And I was doing some marketing operations for them. Just before, of course, my movie, now that it's taking off, I'm on to that now. But so I'm forgetting where we started, but you wanted me to just give you some stories from my experience with these other companies. Right?
Blockchain and
Yeah.
trade. Yeah.
So that's what that was, man. The global trade, I think it'd be cool if everybody at some point in their life experiences something like that.
Yeah.
But it's also like evidence of the desperation around the world.
Definitely.
And so I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a good thing, but it's certainly an experience worth having. Yeah.
I mean, definitely. Like you said, how everybody's trying to make a buck out of a situation, right? That's what happened with blockchain. Also, I feel like in terms of NFTs,
Absolutely.
where the NFT market was so saturated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like everybody's who was just going off with like generic artwork,
Yeah.
trying to make a buck off that.
Yeah. Very much.
Yeah.
And that was the stuff we were trying. The problem is because we were trying to build something we felt had potential while this craze was going on, we were often bucketed with that.
Yeah.
But then if you actually saw what was we were building, it had nothing to do with it. Of course, NFT as a technology was still involved here, but the purpose of the NFT was not about the artwork. It was it was just a representative token. And of course, it can still be built, and blockchain is still a good technology. And there are other interesting projects going on out there and still happening. And honestly, I think even for art, films, and everything, blockchain is inevitable. Yeah, it's just a matter of time, and there will be ups and downs always, but over time they will stabilize to a point where it becomes a norm. It's going to happen, give or take, within the next 5 years, I'd say.
Also, talking about trends, diving into what's going on in social media about Animal, the film. What do you think about that?
I have not watched it.
Like, what's happening on social media, how people are criticizing it about the approach that is taken.
Yes, fair. I would have to agree with their criticisms. I obviously don't know the filmmakers or the actors in it. I mean, I know of Ranbir Kapoor. Obviously, he's famous. I know the filmmaker made Kabir Singh before, which again is a film that I, let's say spiritually or philosophically don't necessarily vibe with. So I would say the same with this. I think there are ways in which stories can be handled. And I think filmmakers, especially those who have the resources behind them and who have the reach, have a responsibility. Uh, I'm not saying they need to be making preachy, like life-changing films, but I think there's a way, and I'm not saying violence is bad inherently, but I think there are ways violence can be used. I think there are ways to address daddy issues, for example, on screen. And and I feel that perspective is heavily lacking in a lot of Bollywood in general. It makes me sound like I know a lot. I don't. But that's just my personal opinion. And the problem is, if I say more about this, it's not like anyone knows me. I'm not like some famous filmmaker. And I doubt this will harm any of my potential going forward. But I think Bollywood could do a lot more with just because of the reach it has, the resources they have. And I think they have a responsibility to just improve their storytelling. They really could. It's not that they don't have good writing. They have good writers, they have good filmmakers, and the actors are talented people. They could easily. So it's a collective responsibility. And the studios, I think, are primarily responsible for pushing the agendas that these movies do. And I think they can do better, and they should.
Yeah. Okay. Before we wrap up this interview, I want to ask you, like, what's the one piece of advice you want to give to the young filmmakers of today?
Okay, one piece might be a little short because like I said, I've been in a talkative mood today.
Yeah. Go on.
But maybe a couple of things. Change is the only constant. I think that's been evidenced by part of my story and also the experiences you guys have probably had just growing up through COVID and stuff like that. So, what change is the only constant implies is that you need to learn to adapt and be flexible. So, when the chance arises, take that perspective needed to realize, do I need to change right now? How do I stay relevant with the times? So these are important questions to ask oneself. And in order to be able to do that, you need to take care of yourself. And by taking care of yourself, I mean physically and financially. Physically, it's as simple as sleeping well, eating well, exercising, right? These three things. Because only if you're in good physical health will you be able to achieve the things you want to and give them the necessary attention they deserve. And that will enable you to become more adaptable and flexible in this world. And I don't mean obviously like physically, like touching your toes. I mean just mentally flexible to be able to adapt to the change that occur. So that. And I think the one thing I would leave you with, if I had to just leave you with one thing, is that nobody really knows anything. That's the truth of the matter. There's a lot of people out there who will claim they know this or know that. And if there's one thing I have come to know in my life is that the more I know, the less I know. So keeping that in mind, I think we don't lose anything by being a little kind. So the last thing I'll leave with is just be kind, It doesn't hurt to be nice to other people because you never know what they're going through. That's all.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Yeah, cheers.
That was Raghav Murali for you guys. I'll see you in the next time out.